Hello everyone, my name is Jason, and today I'll be demonstrating the sharpening of this custom folder right here. This is a George VECP. It is a full titanium frame lock and body with a CTS XHP steel blade, stone washed, very nice, very smooth, with great lockup. The customer sent this to me because he was having difficulty sharpening it with an Edge Pro, mainly because of these thumb studs to each side of the blade here. Prevents them from getting too low on the blade. I'm going to show today how to get around that a little bit and some measures of care when you're dealing with an expensive knife and trying to take care of it and maintain it, sharpen it. That way you don't cause any unnecessary damage. One of the first things you want to do in this case is protect the titanium handle right here. When we're sharpening, we're going to be at an extreme angle like this. You want to protect this area because it may come in contact with the hone. Right now it's not going to be such a big deal because I'm going to start with a diamond stone to get a feel for the steel. I've never sharpened this steel before, but I'll probably move on to the waterstones if what they say about the steel is true, kind of like a D2 steel if I remember correctly. So it might end up sharpening better on the waterstones than it would on the diamond stones. Find that out in a minute though. There is a slight sharpening error in the blade back here. There is a recurve right in this section, meaning the heel of the blade is a little bit longer in height this way than this section of the blade here. It's not too bad, but it is going to cause some difficulties, some minor grinding we're going to have to do to get that out. If you don't take things like that out of the bevel when you're sharpening, they'll transfer into the new bevel that you establish on the blade, especially if you cut to a lower angle, because you're grinding more away in sections here and up in here than you would be in here, so you'd end up with larger bevel areas. I'm also going to throw a little tape up on the thumb studs, just in case we get close to those too. Don't want to mar those up. These precautionary measures that I'm taking right here, I don't know, some might call it extreme. It's not something you typically do on a $50 pocket knife or even a $100 pocket knife, but this is a very expensive custom knife that a person waited to get. So you don't want to put even little minor scratches anywhere on it. You want to take good quality care of it. I'm going to start out with a 220 grit DMT extra coarse diamond hone today. I'm doing that to correct this little problem in the bevel here and get a feel for the steel. I've used diamond stones for a few years now. They're my preferred method, even though water stones are catching up real quick. But with these stones I can get a good feel for how the steel has been heat treated and how it will perform or how it will sharpen as I progress through the stones. I'm going to use a edge protractor first of all to find out what edge angle we're dealing with. Set this in here like this. Turn on the laser, and this edge is really obtuse. It's not even at all either. It's about 34 degrees on one side and 24 degrees on the other. Make that about 33 degrees on one side and about 24 on the other. Unfortunately, even though it's kind of sharp, or what most people would consider pretty dang sharp, that geometry is not going to allow for much edge retention or cutting performance. When you cut, if your geometry is very thick, like this blade is, the tip is already basically dull because your geometry behind it is so fat. When you deal with a much thinner bevel like this, the geometry is always thin, starting point is very sharp and stays sharp for much longer. So enough of me talking, we're going to get to a little sharpening here. We're going to start out at a very elevated angle, probably about 30 or 40 degrees per side, doing this to correct the bevel down here. We don't want to start low because that'll distort the bevel. So we start high instead of grinding flat, which would just take way too long to then reestablish a bevel. So we grind at a higher angle, like this. Actually, that extreme angle that I'm using is the bevel angle that's on here. And you'll be able to see it from this side. Now, a lot of people always ask the question, how do you find an angle, how do you hold an angle? I don't really go for angles, I just sharpen to what feels right. Our angle that we're going to use is going to be something along this compared to what we're at right now. How do you hold it? I use a system of pressure points. One is right here, or you'll see me push right here with my index finger. This is actually putting straight direct pressure on the bevel that's touching the stone. If you take away all the rest of the blade and just think about this single bevel on the stone, it's just laying there flat, so you want pressure directly pushing on it. And then the only other pressure you want is pushing this way. I typically use 3 of them though to balance out the blade as it goes through the curve. So I push down here, push this way here, and I also rotate the blade a little bit in such a manner like that. So as you push down the stone, all you do is lift the handle up and the blade follows its own curve down the stone. Right now I'm focusing the pressure of my grinding right in the heel here to remove more metal from that area at this time. That way when I go back to grinding the whole blade, I end up grinding the whole blade instead of just sections here and here. No, it's not a camera trick. I am left-handed, so it might look a little awkward to most of the world, I should say. Although this stone's working, I can already feel that I need to change up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to set this to the side and move right into the waterstones. This stone right here is a new stone on the market. It's called the Nubatama stone. It's in the bamboo series and it's 180 grit. Stone will build a real fine slurry. It's a very hard stone by stone definition, if that makes any sense to some. It's not going to build a lot of mud. It's going to cut fairly quickly and make a bunch of noise. It's also going to work very dry. Okay, so that's grinding a lot better. Start cutting the angle back a little bit. You don't want to exactly go for the full angle right from the get. You want to start cutting it back about half. Do about half the cut and then go down to your final angle. Otherwise you're just going to spend a bunch of time cutting back on the bevel. You could end up distorting the bevel from grinding in too much in one area. You could end up with a wide tip. It's something you just don't want to do because you end up rushing things. That's the last thing you really want to do in this is rush. You just want to take your time. It may look like I'm moving quickly excuse me, when I'm sharpening, but I also have many years of experience, and with experience comes speed in your sharpening. So don't try and rush things before you're capable. Although this stone doesn't hold water, I'll periodically put water on it, washes off some of the old slurry, and kind of refreshes the stone. On this side, because it's my unnatural side, I'm actually using my finger down at the bottom here as kind of what you call a bump stop to the blade. Because you got to get so far up into the heel right here to sharpen it. I don't want to hit the titanium handle at all, even though it is taped. I don't want to run the risk of scratching it. Nice thing about custom knives is the steel's done very well. Heat treat, I should say. Always takes a little longer to grind, but in the end the edge always ends up more crisp, more burr-free, just a real pure sharpness. Getting very close. Got a little bit of a slurry forming on top of the stone. And that helps with the transition of grit in the case of these waterstones. These are probably the closest to a natural stone you can find on the market currently without spending hundreds of dollars on natural stones. And the grit's going to build up on the surface like so. It's going to break down. It's going to give a finer polishing effect than the stone is actually rated to, even though it's still cutting quickly, which allows you to skip up higher to a much finer stone. In this case I can probably go straight to 1000 grit, but I'm not going to skip so high. I'm going to use a 400 grit after this. I guess one of the best ways I've come to describe the mechanics of sharpening is through my points of pressure that I put on the blade and a simple understanding of the movement. Most people think it's a slicing of the stone, but you don't want to slice the stone, you want the stone to slice the blade. That's the whole point of the process that you're doing here. The movement is pretty much going to be the same for all blades. You just got to understand what that movement is. There's two basic ones, and the first one's always going to be forward and back on the stone as you're grinding motion, and the next one's going to be a U-shaped arc this way, and that's the motion that your hands basically need to move as you go through the belly of the knife. seems good. I'm going to go ahead and cut down to our final angle here. Probably gonna have to make this into a 2 or 3 part sharpening series on this one. I plan on taking my time, moving a little slower with it, checking it more often. You end up with better results that way. That way you don't have to go back and do it a second time too. You see me rinsing off to the side here, getting the swarf off the blade. You want to be careful when you do that too, holding the blade down, rinsing down the blade. Don't want to get all up in the pivot. That way you'd have to blow it all out and re-oil it. Just another step you want to not have to do if you don't have to. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be it for this stone. That looks pretty good for right now. I think from here the 400 grit will do us well.